Today, we're going to look at the story of one of the most incredible figures in all of history. I mean, he was a shepherd, a warrior, a poet, and a king. But his real story, the one that matters to us, it isn't about his victories. It's actually a story of failure, of grace, and a promise that changes absolutely everything.
Just imagine this for a second. You're the youngest kid in the family, the one nobody really pays attention to. And now you're standing in front of a 9-foot-tall warrior decked out in armor, and all you've got is a little leather sling and a couple of smooth stones. So the question is, why? Why would God choose this boy in this moment to completely rewrite the future of a nation? That question right there, that's the key to understanding the entire life of King David.
You have to understand, David's world was a brutal place. Ancient Israel was just this chaotic mess of rival tribes and enemy nations. Every king took his throne by force and held it with the sword. And it's into this storm of politics and war that God steps in. But he doesn't choose some mighty general. No, he finds a shepherd boy out in the field who just had a heart that was after him.
So on one side, you have King Saul. He was the people's choice. I mean, he looked the part, right? Tall, powerful, everything you'd think a king should be. But his entire rule was just poisoned by fear and this deep, consuming jealousy that ate him alive. And then on the other side, you've got David, young, overlooked, but driven by this incredible faith. And this contrast, it shows us something so profound. While we're all looking at the outside, at strength and appearance, God is looking at the heart. He saw something in David that no one else did. And from that point on, man, David's life just takes off. He's anointed by the prophet Samuel while he's still just a boy. He faces down Goliath not with armor, but with just total trust in God. Of course, that victory makes him a hero, but it also makes him a target. For years, he's hunted like an animal in the wilderness by a paranoid King Saul. But through all the betrayal, all the hardship, his faith holds strong, until finally, he's crowned king and unites a broken Israel into one nation. But becoming king wasn't the end of his battles. In fact, it was just the beginning of his greatest war. David's victories in public were legendary, but his private struggles, they would nearly destroy him. Because even a man the Bible calls a man after God's own heart can fall. And David fell, tragically. And this is where the story gets really, really human.
At the very peak of his power, David commits a terrible sin. We're talking adultery and murder. And when he's confronted, he doesn't make excuses. He just shatters. And in that brokenness, he writes Psalm 51, which is this raw, desperate cry for mercy from the absolute bottom of his soul. And this is the real David. You see, his greatness wasn't that he was perfect, it was his willingness to own his brokenness and run straight back to God.
So you could say David fought two kinds of wars. The external ones, against giants and Philistines and armies, that's the stuff of legend, right? But the internal battles, that's silent, grinding war against his own pride, his own lust, his capacity for deception, those were way more dangerous. His biggest enemy wasn't some giant in armor, it was the sin hiding in his own heart. And this, right here, is the most important part of the whole story. David's life isn't just a warning. Every single failure, every heartbreaking mistake, it all served a purpose that was so much bigger than him. His imperfections created this deep longing in his people and in all of us for a better king, a perfect king, one who would never, ever fail.
And this is what turns David's life story from just a biography into a prophecy. See, his life wasn't just his own. It was like a living, breathing shadow pointing toward a much greater reality. So what if his entire story, the shepherd, the king, the broken man, what if it was all a blueprint for someone else who is coming?
And when you look, the parallels are just stunning. David, the shepherd from Bethlehem, becomes a king. Jesus, the good shepherd, is also born in Bethlehem and is the king of everything. But the huge difference is in their nature. David was a flawed, sinful man. Jesus was the perfect, sinless God-man. God made a promise to David, the Davidic covenant, that his throne would last forever. But Jesus brings the new covenant, and he fulfills that promise, not with an earthly throne, but with his own blood, securing a perfect, eternal kingdom for anyone who trusts in him.
So, okay, why does this ancient king story matter so much for you and me right here, right now? Because it shows us God's pattern of grace. It shows us how our own stories, with all of our own wins and our own failures, can fit into his much, much bigger plan of redemption. If you take away just one thing today, let it be this.
David's life is proof that your brokenness does not disqualify you. It's not the end of your story. In fact, in God's hands, that broken ground, it's the very soil where he plants the seeds of his most amazing grace. God doesn't toss out the broken parts of our lives. He builds something beautiful with them.
And the pattern of grace we see in David's life, well, it's available to every single one of us. It starts when we're just honest and acknowledge our own failures, our own brokenness. It continues when we turn to God and just ask for the mercy that He freely offers. And it all finds its home when we receive total forgiveness through Christ, the perfect King that David's imperfect life was always pointing to.
So I'll just leave you with this to think about. When you look at your own life, the good and the bad, can you see how God might be using even your struggles for a purpose that's bigger than you can see right now? Just let that thought settle for a bit. And remember, our hope isn't in being perfect. It's in the perfect King who loves and redeems and restores broken people.